some of the results of the work that you all have been doing here. And really, when we think about what we're trying to do, it is something that we want to be able to report on to change lives that we've influenced. Really, you know, when we think about, right now we're going to talk a little bit about an influencer change framework. And when we think about leadership, leadership is all about the influence that you're exerting within the communities that you serve. It really brings changes that people can see and measure. A woman came into Gramercy Tavern who was clearly upset. She was noticed by the maitre d' named Carlos. Gramercy Tavern is right there in the Flatiron District of New York City, and it's a really upscale restaurant. She was right beside herself because she just left her purse in the taxi cab that had brought her there, and the taxi cab had disappeared into a sea of yellow on the street. So now she didn't know, number one, how she was going to pay for this lunch at this upscale restaurant. Number two, how she'd even have money to pay for her ride back to work afterwards. And number three, would she ever see her wallet? Would her identity be compromised? Would she ever see her cell phone again? Carlos was quick on his feet and was thinking about the customer. And what did he do? He said, listen, don't worry about paying for lunch. That's the last thing I want you to worry about. I'm going to seat you with your party. They're already here. I want you to just leave it in my hands. But what I do need is I need your cell phone number. So he takes her cell phone number, and for the next half hour, Carlos has his team calling that number over and over again until the cabbie finally picks up the phone and answers it, realizes the woman's left the purse in the car, and by this time he's a half hour away from the restaurant. So Carlos, again, begins to think. He says, okay, I'll pay you to meet me halfway, and gets in his car. He goes out and meets her and comes back with the purse and delivers it to the woman before she's finished with her lunch. Now, how do you think she felt about that restaurant? Terribly indebted, right? Now she feels like, I'm going to come back to this restaurant more often because they care about their customers. Danny Meyer is the owner of several restaurants in New York City, and of the thousands of restaurants, he has one of the most loyal customer bases out there because his employees are not just, Carlos was not just a one-off. He was one of many who began to look for what is most important to the customer who's right with them there. So what we realize about Danny Meyer is this doesn't happen by accident. He's an influencer. And like many influencers, he begins to think carefully and strategically about the end result that he wants to get and what kinds of things he needs to do to get to that measurable result. So this story comes from a book called Influencer. Have any of you ever seen this book before? Influencer is a book by 5 researchers, Joseph Grenny, Carrie Patterson, David Maxfield, Ron McMillan, and Al Switzer. And these 5 authors looked over 17,000 sociological articles about people doing significant work, and then and read all their books and everything they could find on, and then began to go out and discover which ones were really making a difference. And they tell about 12 to 15 stories in this book. They keep wrapping back on them and showing what they're doing to create the kind of results that they're getting in their communities. It's a tremendously valuable book, and I'll try to summarize some of it for you in this talk right now. First of all, when it comes to influence, right at the beginning, they lay down 3 keys to influence, what all influencers do. Number 1, the first key is focus and measure. Influencers have a clear focus on their result, and they're always clarifying the result and making sure people around them understand what result they're looking for in the lives of their employees, in the lives of the people that they're serving. And in terms of measurement, they're zealous about measurement. And they'll be coming back on measurement over and over again, and they lift up those things that are being measured so that people are on the same page with them on an ongoing basis. The second key is finding vital behaviors. One of the great discoveries was that there are often 2 or 3 high leverage behaviors that if you address those, everything else falls in line around those key vital behaviors. The third key is that influencers use all 6 sources of influence. They don't just use 1 or 2, and we'll get into those 6 sources of influence in just a moment. But they don't just use 1 or 2. In fact, the writers of this book say they overdetermine success. And in fact, what they do through utilizing all 6 forms of measurement or forms of influence is that they increase their odds by tenfold of success, because they're using a whole lot of different levels of trying to influence what motivates people to change and what abilities they'll need to make those changes in their lives. Let's take a closer look at these 3 keys. The first key that we have is focus and measure. You know, a lot of leaders out there have fuzzy and uncompelling goals. They don't tell enough detail. They don't make it very clear what they're really looking for. In contrast to this, we might look at somebody like a Don Berwick. Don Berwick is now the retired leader of the Institute for Health Improvement. It's a small nonprofit. And in December of 2004, he was asked to address a large gathering of healthcare professionals. And what he said to them was, did you know that medical malpractice accounts for the 12th leading cause of death in America? So healthcare is actually causing thousands of deaths every year. In fact, he said, if you were, we all think the crash of a jumbo jet is a tragic thing. But every day, for a whole year, we're seeing people die because of medical malpractice in our hospitals in the numbers that would be the same as a jumbo jet crashing every day. 100,000 people die annually. And so he said at this conference then, let's set a goal. And his goal was very specific and time limited. He said by June 14, 2006, remember it's December 2004, by June 14, 2006, at 9 a.m., we're going to reduce the number of deaths done by healthcare malpractice in the United States by 100,000 people. And so the 100,000 person campaign, the 100,000 Lives campaign was born. And he didn't say, we'll just reduce preventable harm by that time. He said a very specific number of lives, 100,000 lives would be saved. So the second problem that we run into is infrequent or no measures. If you don't have a way of measuring how things are done and you don't do it frequently, other people are going to bring up other measurements along the way. And if those other measurements get mentioned more than what you're talking about, there's a pretty good chance that nobody will be paying attention to the goal that you have. And so we have to have measures that can be done frequently and that can be and that are clear measures. The third problem that often exists is bad measures. Or with bad measures, I think about the Soviet Union when they used to have 5-year plans. And one of their 5-year plans was for nail factories. They needed nails for construction. And they decided to measure the output of nail factories by tonnage. So what do you think the managers of these nail factories began to do? They said, oh, tonnage? That's good. We can do tonnage. And they began to make railroad spikes in unheard of numbers that weren't needed. And they didn't have enough nails to do construction. And it took a little while for the central planners to figure it out. When they ran out of nails to do the construction projects they were having, they had to recalibrate. So bad measures can really hurt you. But what we find is that the measure of a measure is its actual influence. Are you getting the results that you want? They measure their, influencers begin with a clear and compelling statement of goals, like we heard with Don Berwick. And they measure their program frequently using the measure. And then finally, they measure their measures by the behaviors that are influenced. By the way, I've given this PowerPoint to Angela, and if I love you taking notes. It's always a good sign. But, if you'd like, I think Angela can probably get this out to you later. Is that all right, Reggie? Yeah, sure. All right. The second vital behavior that we're looking at, the second key for influencers, is finding vital behaviors. Some of you might know that there are roughly 3,000 drownings in the United States each year. Here in Florida, you've got a huge seacoast, so I'm sure you're aware of this. In Minnesota, we have 10,000 lakes, and we have drownings that happen all the time, and it's just tragic. Such a loss to families whenever a child or an adult drowns. The YMCA took this very seriously because they have, as you know, thousands of locations and pools all over the United States with lifeguards on duty. But they found that their lifeguards were active greeting the members, setting up the lanes in the pool, making sure the chemicals were right in the pool, collecting all the kickboards from the previous class. And they weren't paying as much attention to what was going on in the pool, so they were having a drowning problem at their camps and at their facilities. And so they kicked off a vital behavior among their lifeguards. And they said, when you're on duty as a lifeguard, we want you to be in a specific place around the pool, 2 or 3 lifeguards, and you're going to scan every 10 seconds your section of the pool, and if you see anybody in trouble, you're going to respond within 10 seconds. And so the 10-10 initiative was born, and drownings went down dramatically at YMCA facilities all over the country. We think about Danny Myers. Remember that Gramercy Tavern story that we started out with? Well, Danny has something that he calls his DOT system, the ABCD. He says, always be collecting dots. That's what he teaches his employees. 1 or 2, remember, vital behaviors are 1 or 2 behaviors that change a whole lot of other behaviors. And he says to his employees, we're going to be looking for those data points about the people we serve in our places. Because if we serve them well, it'll make all the difference in our business. And he works hard for those folks to be looking. If someone, let's say, is a book publisher, he makes sure that these people will collect that information and sit that book publisher in the same vicinity of the restaurant, maybe near another table where there's other book publishers having lunch. So they begin to network and connect with one another. So what we say is 2 behaviors might affect 50 others in a person's life. And this is critical in the kind of work that you're doing to influence literacy, to influence the homeless, and begin to help them make changes in their lives. And then the third key that we get to here is the key of engaging all 6 sources of influence. And for this, I want to look at a story that's not in the book. It's a story about my friend, who's a former major, an African-American leader in North Minneapolis, which is a predominantly African-American part of the Twin Cities. You know, in our city, African-Americans have an unemployment rate that's twice the general population. And the poverty in the African-American community is substantial. And so when Lewis King came to the Twin Cities about 25 years ago, he came and looked around and began to realize we need to do something about that right away. And he started an institution called Summit Academy OIC, initially training people in construction skills and having people from the local union come in. The OIC movement was started by Leon Sullivan out of Philadelphia. And Leon Sullivan, you might have heard of the Sullivan Principles that were developed in the 1970s and 80s around the South, against apartheid in South Africa. But he was a very practical urban leader, and he wanted to make sure people had the skills they needed to get a job. And so what he did, what Lewis King, being out of the Army as a major, he began to think through, what do we need to do here? And Lewis developed an institution that today is, they not only teach people construction skills, so they come out as an apprentice in carpentry or electrical contracting, but also they focus on healthcare, so they're developing public health workers. And then they've more recently developed an IT desk service, so that now like people from Best Buy are coming in and teaching folks the skills they need to provide an IT desk service at the facility there. So they have two things that they're really going after. They say we want to work hard while we're here together and respect others. Because when you go into the workplace is not going to conform to serve you. Your life has to conform to serve what your folks want in that workplace. So if we were to look at the six sources of influence, what we look at are two things: motivation and ability. On the personal level, we say we want to help people learn to love what they hate. They'll come in with habits already developed in their lives that are self-defeating. So for instance, they created a GED program because many people were not making it through the public school GED program. In the last 3 years, they've taken people from a 4th grade level of education and helped them get their GRE. Not their GRE, their GED, their high school diploma. That is an entry level for any kind of job out there. You've got to have a high school diploma. And so people were, when their parents took them out of school, or when they decided to come out of school because it didn't fit their lifestyle or whatever. I mean, they weren't ready, they couldn't read at a certain level, and teachers were expected to do it. And it felt better to not be there than to be embarrassed at school. Now, some of these folks are coming back around, and 262 people have gone through the GED program and gotten their GED and are now gainfully employed in the Twin Cities in the last 3 years, which is more than the Minneapolis Public School produced in that time. So the second thing is we want to help them do what they can't. So he brought volunteers from all over the Twin Cities to come alongside these folks trying to get their GED. He brought journeyman electrician and carpenters alongside these folks wanting to learn construction skills and get them onto the job site so they could earn a living that would be family supportive wage. On the social side, which is the next level, we need to provide encouragement. The staff and the volunteers are always encouraging the folks and celebrating their success as they get through every level of their certification. And the next level, the ability side, is We're going to walk with you. We're going to provide assistance. We're going to help you learn how to run heavy equipment. We're going to help you learn how to make the right decisions on the job site. We're going to help you succeed. Then on the structural level, they're always providing models by lifting up former graduates and showing how they have a family-supported wage and how now they're keeping their families together and helping the community because they have the economic wherewithal to buy a truck, to buy a home, to be able to provide for their family, and a sense of pride wells up within graduates, and they pass that pride back in by changing the economy of folks, and then we change their space. They start out by working in a facility that used to be a warehouse, and now it's been completely refurbished. It's a beautiful place to learn how to, how to read, how to become a contractor, how to become a public health worker, all these things. And as that happens, then they go out and they're ready on day one when they go to the job site to go to work. This next diagram shows the 6 sources of influence. And this is something that I think we all need to learn how to do. As entrepreneurs in the social space, which you all are, you want to find those vital behaviors. That means you're going to analyze your environment, your clients. You want to figure out what vital behaviors do they need if they're going to succeed and have a sustainable lifestyle and move out of the shelter into a place where they have permanent housing and a home. And then we want to execute and evaluate, do we have the right behaviors? So we clarify the measurable results and we analyze whether those measurable results are the right measurements. We always want to analyze what's going on among the clients that we're serving, among the people we're serving. Now I'm going to send you off in an exercise. Reggie, will they have 25 minutes or 20 minutes? What's that?
20.
You have 20 minutes. You'll have this diagram to make some notes on, and you'll have instructions at your site. You've got 3 questions that you'll need to answer. And what we want you to do is take a look at this and see how this model might fit the circumstance that you're in as you're trying to influence the outcomes for the people you're working with. So I'd like to send you your tables now. Your instructions will be at your table, and you can get right into it. Reggie? Thank you.